she kisses him, he remembers. It's as if his past lives come flooding back to him, much like when we remember who we are by knowing all is love. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of TrueLove Talks, as part of a series of videos in Vlogmas, where YouTubers make a video a day about Christmas, but if everything here is about Christmas, then everything's fair game. So thank you very much for your comments on my videos. Many of you who are commenting seem to appreciate these talks. I do want to know, however, do you like hearing stories of my personal experiences or not? Because there were more comments on videos that do not pertain to my personal experiences. However, I thought that they were helpful and insightful, but if nobody wants to hear it, then I will not share them anymore. Today I want to talk about, if we are gods, why do I not feel like one? And I guess this is kind of a Christmassy theme, since Christmas is about, birth of Jesus, supposed to be the Son of God. We are gods. Jesus told us we are gods. So why do I not feel like a god? Now, I've been contemplating this for quite some time, and what is a god supposed to feel like? That is a really good question, because we have this sort of preconceived notion of what a god is supposed to feel like or is supposed to act like. What is a god supposed to be? How do they behave? Does a god cry? Does a god fall in love? Does a god hate? Does a god have insecurities? And for the most part, we have the myths and legends and fairy tales, and we also have movies or comic book stories to rely on in terms of understanding the psyche of a god. But we have this idea that a god is supposed to be this all-powerful, impervious being who can destroy worlds and create worlds with a thought. And yet we are supposed to be creator beings. We are supposed to be the gods. Yet we forgot who we are, and we pretended we're humans, and here we are suffering from all our insecurities and pain and traumas, and we're victimized by this world we created that we forgot we created. So I don't know about you, but I feel far from a god. But if you look at the stories of the myths and fairy tales and even superhero movies, these gods that we revere or idolize as being superhuman, they all have negative qualities, positive qualities, weaknesses, strengths, vulnerabilities, insecurities. So they're really just like us, but their powers are emphasized. Their personalities are emphasized. They're sort of caricatured in a way, and then presented back to us to say, hey, this is you, by the way. Hello. So in my personal journey of self-exploration and trying to figure out which god I am, and I know which one I am, by the way, but I've explored through past life regression and reading into movies and the myths and everything that I've come across. I've learned more about why my life story happened the way that it did. I've learned how it's been reflected in the myths and movies, and so I did a past life regression. I did a couple of them. I wanted to see if I could connect with myself in my previous form. And I did. And yet that me, that version of me, or, that past life me, she was very different from present me. But at the same time, I still have those qualities in me. And so I went back to Egypt and I went back to Sumer, and I compared the two, and they're very different. And the explanation that I got or received about this was that, well, those are very different times in history, as is now. And there are very different traits and skills that you need in order to survive in the time that you live. So it doesn't necessarily make the qualities that we have now bad or good. There's just qualities that we need in order to survive in this time period. So going back to, say, ancient Egypt or ancient Sumer, in those days, like I mentioned before, we were living in a time of pure abundance and love and grandeur and power and magic, and that's the golden age. And now to contrast that, we're living in this dark age, is a completely different period. So looking at me in that era, let's say Egypt, I felt openness, love, sharing, abundance, all positive traits. A complete absence, in both eras, I felt complete absence of insecurity, fear, ego, protection, defensiveness. There's a complete absence of any of those qualities. And like I said, the difference is that they weren't needed then. When we fell, when things flipped, we needed these qualities to survive, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. The same with Sumer. The personality of my archetype or my character then was very strong and certain and assertive, open. And I also got the sense that love was very different then. It wasn't this sort of romantic love. It was a certainty, it was an openness, it was an acceptance. Whereas now we have this sort of fear of losing the other person, fear of heartache. There's a lot of fear and loss and death put into love that we didn't have before. This idea of romantic love is a new idea, and it's born out of loss, fear, death, because there's an emphasis on time, there's an emphasis on mortality, whereas back then we were aware of our immortality, so we didn't have that. So what is it to feel like a god? Because I get the sense that a god has this sort of inner strength, and yet there must be some vulnerability. I mean, after all, we were created in the image and likeness of the gods. I say we, but I'm getting the sense that there are distinctly different kinds of beings here. When the consciousness fell, there was a new order of gods that came into being. We had the Olympians and then the Titans, and the Titans fell to the Olympians. And the original gods went into hiding, and they hid in the bodies of humans. So they pretended to be like everyone else. The original gods walk among us, are us. So there are certain beings here who are gods, and certain beings here who are humans who have the god life force running through them because they were created from the gods. Okay, so what does it mean to be a god? I would say that one defining characteristic is the ability to create and affect the world around us purely from our minds. Anybody who's experimented with law of attraction, manifestation, that sort of thing, you should be able to detect whether or not you have that ability. Connecting with this power within us is something we can tap into. And I had an experience with this once when I was in New York. I was going to meet a famous screenwriter. We had struck up a conversation, and I went to New York to meet him, to look at his latest film. And while I was there, I started to get scared. I was overcome with insecurities. Who am I to be here talking to this guy? Like, I'm just an ordinary person. It just spiraled out of control, which is what thoughts have a power to do. You leave them unchecked and they just start spiraling out of control. So I sat myself down because I was tired of it. I was like, I can't meet him with this energy, and this is too much. It's ruining my experience, and I can stop this, so I'm going to stop this. So I sat down in a coffee shop, and I go through my exercise that I do when I recognize that I feel a certain way and I want to change how I feel. I wrote down how I feel, and I wrote down how I wanted to feel. And I wanted to feel his equal. I wanted to feel that I had something to offer, that I was a colleague, I was on his level. I worked on it until I shifted my energy, and I felt the shift. I felt incredible. All of a sudden, I felt like a god. I walked through New York City, and I had all eyes turning on me. It was as if they could sense my energy. I was walking down the street, and across the street was a construction site, and the construction workers looked over at me, and I waved at them and smiled, and I waved at people walking past me in the street. It was a complete switch. Before I felt invisible, I felt tiny, I felt powerless, and now I felt powerful. I felt seen, I felt like I was radiant, I was glowing, and the world responded. It was a really powerful experience. Needless to say, my meeting went really well. It was a good, positive meeting. It wouldn't have been if I hadn't have changed how I felt. So to me, that experience exemplifies what a God feels like. So I've tapped into that energy a few times. I've been on a plane when I was particularly good at manifesting. I was in the zone. And on my flight, the pilot came on the intercom and said, there's been really bad turbulence in this area all day long, so we're going to be experiencing some severe turbulence all the way. I said, not on my flight. I closed my eyes and I focused on smooth sailing from here on in. Within minutes, the turbulence had gone, and we never had any turbulence for the rest of the flight. And the pilot came back on the intercom and said, oh, I don't understand it, but there was no turbulence, which is great, but he didn't understand why we didn't have any turbulence, because he said it had been like that all day long in that area. There's a lot of experiences that I've had that I would classify as godlike experiences, yet it's not consistent, And so, when I'm going about my regular day and I have to clean the house and go grocery shopping and I have to clean Ixie's litter box or whatever, and my bed is unmade and I have to do laundry, little things like that, or, like I spill something on the floor and things aren't going my way all day long. I wonder, well, I can't possibly be a god. Like, that doesn't make any sense. This is just human experience. So the dichotomy of having to deal with the mundane reality and then juxtapose that with the ability to change the weather and stop turbulence is like, how do you reconcile the two? Okay, so then I watch a movie like The Nines, and that Ryan Reynolds character in his various incarnations, and he's told that he's like God. He's a 9. And yet here he is smoking crack with a prostitute, and the prostitute is an angel, or, somebody sent from where he lives to come and tell him, by the way, you're not who you think you are. Time to go home. And yet here he is having a weird time with this person, this non-existent being, in a world that he created, thinking that he's just one of the people, and yet he's the creator of that world. That sort of dichotomy is very hard to wrap your head around sometimes, and that's why we have to remember. You can't, it's not enough to intellectually conceive of the possibility or to think, well, I can believe that is true. You have to remember, because it's in the remembering that you know for certain. I do think that there's some kind of glorification that we've given gods in our understanding of what they are, but at the same time, there is a glorification because in our being human, we have buried ourselves and buried our power and ability, and in order to hide our existence here, so that we can experience this place as a real place, as opposed to, like I said before, like, how much fun is it when you're in this world and not immersed in it as a real place, but you're constantly aware of the fact that this place isn't real. I don't know, personally, me remembering that this place is not real made it more interesting. Would I have thought that had I not thought this place was real to begin with? I don't know. It's kind of impossible to tell without having that experience, but perhaps. I think in truly awakening, we need to remember who we really are. All of our past lives, our story, we tap into our God powers and the mundane human existence fades away. Like I said in a previous video, the quote from First Daughter, it's like you're experiencing life for the first time. And she said she was, because it's true. The gods created this world and we lost ourselves in it. So there's going to come a time in which we remember and are no longer only human. And we get closer and closer to that moment every day. Alright, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this video. Tune in tomorrow for another one. Hope you're having a great day. Bye for now.